Hello, this is the first video to cover the subject of dimensions. Now, dimensions, of course, are very important in our floor plans and in our elevations and details and so on. And it is especially important to learn how to use dimensions in AutoCAD. I have to admit that for many years, when I worked with AutoCAD, I avoided learning the details of how this system works. And when I finally took some time, I really regretted that I had waited so long. For many years, I just cobbled together the little knowledge I had just to make it work. But the fact is that the system that AutoCAD has for dimensions is actually really powerful, and it just takes a little bit of time to master it. So this class is only about dimensions. The last class was a whole lot of drafting, and this will be not so much drafting, but it covers some big topics that you need to really concentrate in order to absorb. So first, I'll go into a little bit of an introduction, general introduction about dimensions, how we use them. Then I will walk you through the parts of a dimension, which we'll have to know about so that we have the vocabulary necessary and the knowledge of the individual elements of the dimension string so that we can define a new dimension style. And then we will create a dimension style and add dimensions to our floor plans. So I'm showing this floor plan again of that recently completed project. This is the floor plan file, and in it there are a lot of sheets, which you can see if you hold your cursor up on the tab above, or you can see all of these paper space tabs. So if I were to zoom out, you see all of the floor plans. It's a lot of information in this one file. But you can click on each tab and you'll get a sheet. This should be familiar to you now. You get a sheet which has one floor plan on it to scale, in this case 1/4 inch scale. And also in this case, there's a little sub plan, a little detail plan of the elevator cab. There are other tabs here. Let's see, the first floor plan is over here. And so this is how we set up the drawings, just like we have in your set of drawings. But I'm going to go back to the model space tab here, and I'm going to zoom in to the typical floor plan to take a closer look at the dimensions. Now you see up here in this corner there are these dimension strings, and a dimension string is exactly what it sounds like. It's a continuous line of dimensions, one after the other. And it's important to think about dimensions in strings. I've worked with people before that didn't bother to organize their dimensions as well as they could have. And the drawings are a complete mess. It's very hard to get all the information you need on the drawing. And it's just makes for a disorganized drawing, which can lead to confusion. So what you see here still looks like a very confusing drawing, but the dimensions are actually very well organized, considering. For one thing, you see a blue set of dimensions and a yellow set of dimensions. In this case, I don't know how common this is, but in this case, we did this in order to separate two kinds of dimensions. I shouldn't call them blue, they're cyan dimensions are on a separate layer, and they are measuring distances from masonry to masonry. So if you have a run of a brick wall here, we're dimensioning from the corner of the brick wall to the opening, and then the masonry opening or the window opening is dimensioned from here to here with this dimension that's 6 feet, and so on. All the cyan dimensions are measuring masonry to masonry. The yellow layer is measuring non-masonry or interior finish dimensions. So you have the fur out, the distance between the structural concrete masonry wall and the sheetrock, that's 4 inches. And then the interior dimension of this room is 16.5 by 12 feet 11. And this next room, it's 10'4". And then these dimensions are indicating the dimensions of the wall thickness. So, but you'll also notice that they're nice and, to the extent possible, they're nice and neat, and a run of dimensions follows a single line. They're not jumping up and down all over the place. Here, you have, I'm going to zoom out so you can see it, just all the way across the whole drawing. You have a line going all the way across, picking up all the necessary dimensions. Now here, there's a second line, because up here it's measuring the overall width of the room, but down below it's measuring smaller components. And as we go further into the building, we see that there's a lot more to measure. So there's a dimension string here that measures the width of the plumbing wall behind the tub, the length of the tub, the wall next to the tub, which is 5 inches. The width of the foyer is 5'11". 2'8" is the depth of the kitchenette recess. 9 inches is the width of the plumbing wall between the back-to-back kitchenettes, and so on. So all these dimensions, this takes weeks. This takes weeks to make sure that you've got all of the dimensions figured out, represented, worked out, and organized. Now, when I say it takes weeks, it doesn't take a bunch of weeks all at one time. But over the course of doing the drawing, you're constantly massaging these dimensions so that they read. For example, right here, dimensions are always on top of the dimensions line if you can fit them. But in this case, if this dimension number were up here, it would conflict with the sink, and you might not be able to read it. So you have to move it, you have to adjust it in order for it to be readable. So in this case, it was determined that we couldn't move the dimension string to the right, so that instead we just brought this dimension number below the dimension line. So there's a lot to it. Now what you also see here are green dimensions, and they have much smaller numbers. Well, this is used for detailed plans. I'm in model space, so all of the layers are on. We use the system that we learned over the last 2 classes, the current viewport freeze system. So if we look at the floor plan in model space, we see all the layers on, and in this case we see this green layer, which are the notes and dimensions for a detail plan of the kitchen in this case, or the bathroom over here. And you see that the numbers on this dimension are much smaller than the numbers on this dimension. And that's because the yellow dimension is going to be in a 1/4 inch scale drawing. I'm sorry, an 1/8 inch scale drawing. And the green dimension is for a 1/2 inch equals a foot drawing. So when the floor plan is enlarged to give more detail, the dimensions can be smaller, right? The numbers don't have to be the same height in model space, but in paper space, when they're printed out, this dimension and this dimension will be the same height, because this detail floor plan of the bathroom will be printed out at 1/2 inch scale, and the overall floor plan is going to be printed out at 1/8 inch scale. Hope that makes sense. But anyway, it can be confusing to see all of the layers open, so I'm going to go to the typical plan tab, model space tab, and I will double click on the viewport to maximize that viewport, and now you don't have any of those confusing green layers or green dimensions there. It's confusing enough, right? You see all of these things, but if you look closely, every dimension should make sense, right? If you look at any given dimension, you should be able to clearly see what it is referring to. Okay, so this particular dimension style you see here, I was working on this project with a partner, and he uses this style where you have arrows. I use tick marks, which are little 45-degree diagonal lines that indicate where one dimension stops and starts. It's all the same. It's all that's a matter of taste. But let's see. That's all I want to talk about now in terms of the overview of how we use dimensions. It's just to reiterate, it's just very important for you to make sure that you keep them organized. And in order to do that, you need to know how to manipulate dimensions, how to create them, how to create the right style, how to get them to print out exactly the way you want them. So that's what we're going to learn today, and it's a step-by-step process. In the past, when I used to teach in front of live students, I would tell them in advance, several weeks in advance, I'd say, don't miss the class on such and such a date. We're going to cover dimensions. You don't want to miss that class. It's painful for a couple of hours, but you really need to learn this, and you just have to suffer through it. And the beauty of learning online is that you can come back to this and get a refresher pretty easily. But I want you to just prepare for a little bit of confusion here, but in a couple of hours you will have the building blocks for working with dimensions forever, and it'll be very helpful to you. You use them all the time in every drawing. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to minimize that drawing. This is where we left off with our reflected ceiling plan. You will have 3 handouts for this class, and the first one is the text and dimension style overview, which I encourage you to read now. Well, actually, no. I'll cover this as we go, but I'd like you to read it to make sure you understand it once these lectures are over. That's probably the best thing to do after you've listened to the lectures. But it's a good reference to give you a sense of how text is different than dimensions in the way that we deal with assigning the proper size so it prints out properly. Another handout, which we'll start out with, is the parts of a dimension. So you should print this out or have this on your screen so that you can follow along. It's pretty straightforward. I made this handout so you could just use it as a reference when you need it. I don't know if we'll go through it in great detail, but you should have that handy. And then the third handout is this handout that shows all of these dialog boxes, and it's in this handout where we go step by step creating a new dimension style. And the style is it's when you create a dimension style, you're creating a style that's appropriate, that's designed for a particular dimension, or maybe it has a different kind of font or a different kind of tick mark or arrow. You create your defaults for the dimension style you want to use, and you give it a name, and that's your dimension style. We're going to learn how to create a dimension style for our drawing, and then finally we will apply we'll practice a few dimensions, and then we'll put our dimensions on our floor plan. All right, so we're 17 minutes into this video already. Let's start with the parts of a dimension. This handout shows you a typical dimension, a piece of a dimension. Well, let's see. What would you call it? It is a dimension string. It's a dimension that you can string along in a long line, but it's one individual element of the dimension string. So we're looking at it in great detail here. Let's go to a drawing with the dimension on it. I'll just take this one here and move it off to the side. And what you'll see here is exactly what you'll see in the handout. We'll get back to the handout in a second, but every dimension, of course, has text here. Some cases it's a measurement, but you can override that to make it be actual text, words, mixture of words and dimensions, whatever you want. That's your text. Then there is the distance between the text and this next line down here. This line underneath the text is called the dimension line because it is the length, in most cases, of the dimension that you are measuring. So this is the dimension line. Then the distance between the text and the dimension line is called the offset from the dimension line. I want to make sure I'm calling it the right thing. Offset from dimension line, yes. Now these are actual names of these elements, and when we define our dimension style, this is exactly what we're going to see in the dialog boxes, so we need to know what they're called. When you use arrowheads, you see the dimension line goes right up to these lines and they stop. But if you were to use this style, which we will use, architectural ticks, these little 45-degree diagonal lines, then the dimension line actually extends beyond the tick. Okay? Now, two things. One, this tick mark here and this arrowhead here, both are generically called arrowheads, oddly enough. But when we define what we want here at this point, the category is arrowheads. And within that category, you can choose from among a long list of different types of arrowheads, but one of the arrowheads is an architectural tick. Okay, so when you use architectural tick, the dimension line extends beyond the tick, and that variable, that factor, that's called extend beyond tick. And as I say here, only when using tick. These vertical lines here, well, vertical in this case, sometimes the dimensions are rotated, of course, but the lines that go from one end of a dimension line to another are called extension lines. And the reason for that is because they extend from what you're measuring. Let's look at this one. They extend from what you're measuring to the dimension line. Okay? You're not going to have your dimension sitting right on the object. You can't read it. It doesn't make sense. But let me just undo that. Okay. But you need to have these lines that extend from what you're measuring to the dimension line. So those are called extension lines. These extension lines will go, oh yeah, it's down here, sorry. Here, okay. So these extension lines, they come up to the dimension line and they go a little bit beyond. Right? This is very common in architectural drawings where you overlap the ends of lines to emphasize where they cross. Okay, not only do we cross the extension line and the dimension line, but then we put a tick mark on there, and then there's no confusion as to what you are measuring. So the extension line comes up to the dimension line and goes beyond it a little bit, and that is called extend beyond dimension line. Pretty straightforward. Now, two more things. You see at the end of the extension lines, there's a little gap and then two dots. The two dots are called origins. There they are right here. Normally you don't see them because they're touching the object. If I click on this, the two origins are right there. Right on the corners of this windowsill, and you don't see them, but they're important. These are the points when you measure, when you put down a dimension, you really just place these two origin points. And in fact, in this handout, it shows down here when you place a dimension, you pick 3 points. You pick one origin point, you pick the other origin point, and then you pick the location of the dimension line. So it's click, click, click. That's how you place a dimension line. So these origin points are important. Now, another important point is that you don't want to have the extension lines go all the way to the object you're measuring. Let me show you how this could be confusing. I'm going to use the grips to extend these extension lines a little further. Right now, because I've made that change, there's no gap between the dimension and the object that is being dimensioned. And it's confusing graphically. Now it's even more confusing once you print all this and all of these lines are black. on a piece of paper. So it's very important to graphically keep those two elements independent and separate. So you need that gap between the origin and the start of the extension line. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's very important to keep in mind. And that is called the offset from origin. In the same way that this gap between the text and the dimension line is called offset from dimension line. It's a gap between one object and another. All right, so that's a little tour of the parts of a dimension. And I think that's all we need to know for now. I'll lower that. Okay, while I'm still in this drawing, I'm going to look at something here. All right, under the in the Home tab, there are all of these sub toolbars. One of them is the annotation toolbar. The little title bar below the collection of commands here has a little arrow next to it. If you click on that, the bottom bar of the annotation toolbar, you get this pull-down menu. I believe we looked at this before when we created our text style. Right? So this is a drawing, a complicated drawing that we worked on for many months. Let's see how many text styles it has. It's got a bunch that we use for different purposes. Dimension styles. The dimension styles are next. So you can create as many dimension styles as you want, and depending on whichever one is current, that's the one you use. So this isn't super clear, but there's a dimension style used for 1/32 inch equals a foot scale, one dimension style for 1/4 inch scale, another dimension style for 3/4 inch equals a foot, and there's a lot more. There's a bunch of dimension styles, and there's 1/8. Anyway, you create whatever number of dimension styles you want, and then you can choose which one to be current, and then you can place your dimensions in there. So we're going to create our dimension style. So let's get back to our drawing and do that. Here we are. All right. If you haven't already, I mean, if you've been keeping up, then you already have a text style called Arial. You don't have this one. I created that one, I think, to demonstrate something. But whatever text style you use, you don't have to use Arial or Calibri or whatever it's called. But that's your text style. The next one down is dimension styles. And if you haven't done anything here yet, you'll click down here and you'll notice, hold on, I'm going to purge that so we don't have it. One sec. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to quickly pause and go into the drawing and get rid of the dimension style. There was already a dimension style in this drawing for 1/8 inch scale drawings, and that's exactly what we want to create now. So I had to get rid of it. If I go back to that, if I pull down that menu, and now I go to the dimension styles, I click down here and I see that there's only one, which is called standard, and that's the default dimension style that AutoCAD leaves for you. It's not very helpful though. Let me show you. If I go over here, I'm going to show you this dimension. There we go. I created a dimension here using the current style, which is standard. And if I zoom into it, you'll see it looks just like 3 lines, but if I zoom in, you'll see a little arrow. If I zoom in the middle of it, you'll see 192.0000. The default style for AutoCAD is this crazy standard style where you get your dimension delivered to you as a decimal dimension in inches with 4 places after the decimal point. Sometimes I can't figure out how they come up with their defaults. So I'm going to leave that there for now to show you how different our dimensions will be. So let's just jump into it. You're going to need this handout here, and we're going to create a new dimension style. And what's important to keep in mind here, and you'll read about that in this handout, text and dimension style overview, is this. When you work with text in AutoCAD, at least the way we've done it, there are several ways of using text, but you need to scale the drawing up, or I'm sorry, scale the text up or down depending on the scale you're going to print out your drawing. So if you want 1/8 inch high text when you print it out, but your drawing is going to be printed out at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, then that text needs to be 12 inches high, and we use that chart that we talked about. Dimensions are different. With dimensions, we're going to create a dimension style. Actually, I'm going to just read this out because that took some time to describe it clearly, I hope. When creating a dimension style or dim style, you simply fill out the multiple forms describing the characteristics of your dimensions. All the measurements on these forms shall be the desired printed measurements. In other words, if you want your dimension to have 3/32 inch high text, right, then 3/32 is the text height you designate. You do not need to make adjustments to the text height as you do when inserting text. All features of the dimension style are then later scaled up accordingly using the overall scale factor on the Fit tab. So basically what you do, you create the dimension style the way you want it to look when you print it. If you want 3/32 of an inch high text, that's what you assign that dimension style. Then later on, we'll figure out how to scale it up so it looks appropriate for the scale of the drawing. All right. So this is going to be where we create our dimension style. And I'm going to keep this off to the side here. Maybe we can do it like that. Oops. Okay. So over here, I go to the annotation toolbar, and to the left of the pull-down menu that where you decide what your current dimension style is a button called Dimension Style. I'm going to click on that, and the Dimension Style Manager comes up. Off to the right, there's a button that says New. Click on that, and we're going to create a dimension style, and you have to come up with a name for it. So you can't use the / for these names, so I just substitute an underscore for that generally. So I'll say 1_8 dim. So 1/8 inch dim is the name of my dimension style. And as I mentioned before, you create a dimension style for every scale you're going to use. Now, a quick aside here. There's a way that you can do dimensions. It's called the annotative method, where you don't have to go through all this part. But I want you to learn dimensions this way for now. If we have time, we'll go over the annotative method. But this way you have total control of your dimensions. The computer's not making any decisions for you. I feel like this is the best way to learn how to use dimensions. So 1/8 inch dim is the name of our dimension style. That's good. And it says start with standard. Well, that's the only dimension style there. So that's what we're going to start with. And we're going to edit all the default settings for standard and come up with our new style called 1/8 inch dim. I click on continue, and here we are. Now what you see here, this window, is actually a series of tabs all the way across, starting with lines, then symbols and arrows, text, fit, primary units, and so on. Each one of these tabs is printed out on this handout that you have. And we're just going to go through here. It's going to take a little bit of time. Actually, when we run through this, we'll probably pause and go to a new video. But it takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. Okay, so the first tab is called lines. And if you look at your handout, you'll notice you just have to compare each one and see what's different. Okay, colors by block. Well, it's by block. Line type by block. No change. But then you see extend beyond ticks. It says 0 here, but it says 3/32 there. But you also notice that it's grayed out here. This is an unfortunate I don't know, circumstance, because the first thing we want to change is grayed out. We can't do anything here. And that's, if you think about it for a second, it makes sense. Here we're defining the lines of our new dimension style. This particular line is the extend beyond ticks line, right? So if we go back to here, extend beyond tick is right here. You only use it when you're using the tick mark. The default has arrows. So we can't change that until we change the tick mark. So we have to remember to come back and do that. All right, so we'll ignore it for now. Baseline spacing says 49 128ths. It really doesn't matter, but let's just match it. So we're going to type in 3/8. Okay. Next, down below on the left-hand side, no changes. On the right-hand side, it says extend beyond dimension line. Okay, extend beyond dimension line. That sounds familiar. Extend beyond dimension line is this. So how far are we going to go up from the tick mark up? Well, remember, these are the desired printed dimensions. So we want to go just up a little bit. Now, how are you supposed to remember exactly how far you want that little line to go? Well, I have a rule of thumb. If you want your text to read out at 3/32 of an inch, well, then that happens to be a good dimension for pretty much everything else. Take a look at this sample. The text is a certain height. Well, that height is roughly the same height of that extension beyond the tick mark going up to the right, the extend beyond dimension line, and even the tick mark, and also that gap, the offset from origin. So I just generally, if I need a small measurement, I just use 3/32. right? It's just a rule of thumb. So when it says extend beyond dimension line, I want that to print out at 330 seconds. Offset from origin, 330 seconds. Okay, do not check that. Here we go. All right, next page, next tab. I'm going to click on symbols and arrows. This is where you decide which arrowhead to use. I click on this one, and instead of using closed fill, I see all of these different types, right? I'm going to use architectural tick. When I make these changes, you see the changes reflected in the preview window in the upper right hand corner. When I change this one to architectural tick, that one automatically does. The leader should not keep that where it is. Keep that as a closed filled arrowhead. The arrowhead size is 330 seconds. I'm just following my handout. Center marks, I think that it's a line, I guess. This won't matter that much, but anyway, just make it match. So this is line. Dimension break. I get this is a relatively new one. So whenever you see an item that comes up in these windows that's not in the handout, just ignore it, pass it by. They tend to be things that just never come up. Okay, arc length symbol. That's going to be preceding dimension text. Radius jog dimension is 45. That's good. And linear jog dimension, that's not on my handout, so I'm going to ignore it. So that's the second tab. Now, before we go to the third tab, we clicked on architectural tick here. So now we can go back to the first tab, line, and this is no longer grayed out. So in the box where it says extend beyond ticks, change that to 330 seconds. All right, then I'm going to go to the third tab, text. And over here, I'm going to go to the next page. For text, my text style is going to be Arial. And because I made Arial a universal text style, setting the height at 0, then I can set the height here. I don't have to worry about what the fixed height for that text is. You can manipulate it. So I'm gonna type in 330 seconds. That's how high I want my text to be. Everything is 330 seconds with one exception. Okay, so text placement. This is important. All right, if you have text, where do you want it? The vertical placement of it, meaning where do you want it to be placed vertically? Well, we're going to make that above, right? We want our text to be above our dimension line. So you see in the preview, it's right in the middle of the dimension line. If I click on above, it pops up there. That's good. The horizontal dimension, we want that to be centered. So that's good. We won't change that. Now the view direction left to right, that's not on my handout, so you can ignore that. But then offset from dimension line, that's the distance from the dimension line to the dimension itself, the text. This has a default of 330 seconds, but that's too far. It's too far away. So I make it 1/32. That's the one exception to the rule of thumb. All right, it's still not looking perfect up here, but it's getting closer to what we expect. All right, text alignment. So where is the text? Like right here, this vertical bit of dimension. You see that the dimension itself is vertical, but the text is horizontal. That we want to change. And then here, this is a diagonal piece of text, but the number is still horizontal. So we'll check this one where it says aligned with dimension text, and now our dimension is right in line with the dimension line. All right, so that's our third tab. We're getting close. Now I click on the fit tab. All right, if there isn't enough room to place both text and arrows inside the extension lines, blah, 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 you can read through all these, and it all makes sense if you spend the time to look at it, or you can just follow my handout. Here we says, okay, it says either text or arrow, whatever fits best. These are the rules of what to do if such and such happens. If this happens, then do this. All right, text placement. When text is not in the default position, place it says beside the dimension line. I don't like that option. I like the last one, over dimension line without a leader. We can talk about that later, but that's just my recommendation. It's very simple to use dimensions when you have that selected. All right, scale for dimension features. Right here is the crux, the bottom line, the most important little bit of information for the whole dimension style. Up until now, we've created the dimension style based on the desired printed dimension. But you know, if you have a dimension here on your plan and the text is actually 3/32 of an inch, well, that's basically what we have, what this dimension was, that standard dimension. It's so tiny you just couldn't see it, right? 3/32 of an inch is tiny in this plan. So we need to scale it up to the appropriate size for the scale that you're going to print out this drawing. So that's where this overall scale factor comes in. Okay, you'll remember on our on this document from a previous class, the text height handout, there's another row that we didn't talk about at the time. This is called the scale factor. Now, I want to explain it, but I want to preface the explanation with this, that you really don't need to understand how we came up with this number. I think it's interesting, but you can just sort of skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear the explanation. All that's important is that you know where to find this number. And in this handout, you can find what the overall scale factor is for all of these standard scales that we use for our drawings. Let's look at 1/8 inch equals a foot. Now, the scale is 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. Scales are ratios. If you work with metric scales, you'll know that it's, say, 1 to 50 or 1 to 100. It doesn't give the units because it doesn't matter. 1 centimeter equals 50 centimeters. That's a scale. It's a ratio. 1 meter equals 50 meters. It doesn't matter as long as it's the same unit. But in our crazy system, we don't have that. We have 1/8 of an inch equals 1 foot. Well, that's kind of crazy. Why do we have two different units? But let's put them in the same units. Let's put them in inches. Well, then it would be 1/8 of an inch equals 12 inches. Well, let's make them very equal and put them in eighths of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch equals, well, there's 8 eighths of an inch in an inch. So 8 times 12 is 96. So this ratio is 1/8 of an inch equals 96 eighths of an inch. In other words, the ratio is 1 to 96. Kind of crazy. These numbers are crazy. But what it's saying, though, is when you take a floor plan and you want to put it on a small piece of paper, at 1/8 of an inch scale, you have to shrink down that floor plan 96 times exactly for it to be at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. That's how you get 96. Well, it just so happens that that number is handy, because if we want all of these bits of text, measurements, tick size, extend beyond, dimension, all that kind of stuff, if we want them to be the appropriate size, well, we're taking our plan and shrinking it down 96 times. For this dimension to look correct, we have to enlarge it 96 times. So here in this box, all we need to do is put in the scale factor. You don't have to remember what that explanation meant. All you got to do is, okay, it's 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. Look on the chart. What is it? The scale factor, it's 96. Put it here. But no, it's good to know that what you're doing is increasing, you're enlarging all of those elements by 96 times. So it's the appropriate size in your drawing. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but that's the most complicated part of this whole thing. So 96 is the overall scale factor. And we're almost there. Next one, primary units. That's over here. Unit format. Okay, we're going to change unit format from decimal to architectural. The precision, I have it 1/2 inch. For an 1/8 inch scale drawing, 1/2 inch is perfectly fine for your precision. That means it'll round up anything it measures to the nearest 1/2 inch. Fractional format, I use diagonal, not horizontal. That's just, if you have a fraction, it dictates how that's going to be presented. All the rest is the same. Zero suppression. If you have a dimension that's exactly that's exactly 5 feet, like this situation right here, it's 5 feet. You don't want it to read just 5 feet. You want it to read 5 feet 0 inches. So you're not going to suppress 0 inches. So I'm going to uncheck that, and you see it goes back to 5 feet. That's the way it should look. But you do want to suppress 0 feet, because if you have a dimension that's, say, 9 inches, you don't want it to read 0 feet 9 inches. You just want to say 9 inches. So we're going to suppress 0 feet, but not suppress 0 inches. All right, the rest is good. And then, thankfully, the last 2 tabs, alternate units and tolerances, we don't need to make any changes on. So I'm going to hit OK. And then it says, you get back to this Dimension Style Manager page, and I'm going to click on Set Current. All right, set current, and then hit close. All right, that's it for this video. I'm just going to do a quick little check to make sure my dimension looks good. Oh, it's not set current. Let's see why. Somehow it didn't take that last bit. Oh, please don't tell me that it didn't take all that. Okay, I had to pause for a second. I don't know why that happened, but momentarily that wasn't showing as an option. So 1/8 inch dim, I have to highlight it and click on Set Current. All right, and then hit close. And now when I go to annotation up here, 1/8 inch dim is shown as an option. Standard is the other option. And now we can go down here, and real quickly I'll just show what a 1/8 inch dim looks like. There it is. Oh, I have to make a change to that. Okay. Somehow this is not coming together for me as smoothly as I'd like, but okay, that looks more like it. All right, that is our dimension style. We are going to insert our dimensions in our plan in the next video. That's it for this one.